Hi, everyone. Welcome to a KE Report webinar hosted in conjunction with Focus Communications. My name is Cory Fleck, and I'm your host for this webinar. We are featuring Burin Gold, which is traded on the TSX Venture Exchange under the symbol BURG. The company did just IPO back in November of last year. It's a relatively new company here. The company is focused in Newfoundland and Labrador exploration play here, mostly around the company's Hickeys Pond Paradise Gold Project, or HPP project. I am joined by the CEO, Dave Clark, as well as the chairman, Phil Walford. Now, throughout this presentation, I will be interjecting your questions. Feel free to type in any questions you have to the chat area or the Q&A area. I will interject those throughout this webinar when they fit in best with the slides. I am also going to let the guys run mostly with this presentation so we all can get as up to speed as possible with the company and some of the growth, some of the catalysts that are coming. So, Dave, Phil, thank you very much for taking time to share the story with us. Please take it away in terms of the presentation.
Thanks very much, Cory, and thanks to everybody who is attending. And I'm very happy to be here on behalf of Phil and the rest of the board to help give you an update as to where we are and where we're going. So we'll get started right away. We have a fairly heavy slide deck to go through, so we'll keep it snappy and be happy to answer questions as we go along. So standard forward-looking statements, which you should all read with great detail. And here we are. Story overall for Burin Gold. We staked a large land position on the Burin Peninsula, that's in eastern Newfoundland, in 2018, and it covers over 20 kilometers of strike of historical gold showings on two parallel trends. None of those, well, very few of those has ever seen a drill hole. The work that we've done since 2018 as a private company and then more recently as a public company has shown that we've tested 15 holes so far that we've had results for. 14 out of those 15 have intersected broad zones of epithermal gold mineralization. We have some great starting drill results, 10.8 meters of 4 grams and 16 meters of 1.57. We'll see that in more detail as we go along. But we've really determined and demonstrated that we have a significant gold system at Hickeys Pond that needs some drilling. We listed on the TSX in November of 2021. We're trading under the symbol BURG. We are fully funded for our 22 drill program. We have the backing of New Gold and Plethora Private Equity, which are two of our incubating partners. And we have a great property with a district scale potential here that we're going to be testing this year. We're going to test a number of targets on the property, and we will continue to expand on the Hickeys Pond footprint. So what we're going to do in this presentation is really go through these things one by one. I'd like to share some of the results that we have recently released to the markets and go through it and what it might all mean. And then we'll go and look at what we're planning to do this summer in terms of testing all the great targets on the property. So before I go through the property in detail, first, a quick overview of our capital structure. You'll see only thing to highlight here, really, we are very tightly held. The public float's quite small, well capitalized. Our treasury's in good shape. And we have some great partners in New Gold, Plethora Private Equity, and our company insiders who have a significant amount of stock. Board of directors, we have a very skilled, talented board. In particular, I'd like to point out Phil and Sherry. Phil and Sherry come with excellent credentials in Newfoundland and elsewhere. They have a lot of experience in the jurisdiction, and they're really credited by many people as igniting that gold rush that we're seeing in Newfoundland right now with their work at Valentine Lake. And in fact, the PDAC recognized that in 2021 by awarding them the Bill Dennis Award for the Prospector of the Year, which they shared jointly for all of their work that they did at Valentine Lake. So they bring a great deal of experience, credibility, exploration acumen. And before I go on to talk about the project, I thought it would be worth having everybody hear from Phil, who's joined us today, to talk a little bit about his involvement in the company and what he looks for in a project. So I'll turn it over to you, Phil, and then we'll get going on the project after that.
Thank you, Dave. A couple of years ago, I was invited by Dave to join what was then called Bonavista as a director and subsequently the chairman. I had been approached by different groups active in Newfoundland to join their boards, and I did not accept any of them. Not because they were bad or anything, but really what I was looking for was a similar situation, similar key indicators to me that I could see on their properties, that I could see, that I saw at Valentine Lake. And, you know, the first question I have when I look at a project is, does it have the potential to host a major mineable gold deposit? That's a very fundamental question. And to do that, we have to have property size. Most importantly, is there evidence of a large mineralizing system on the property? Is there evidence, historic evidence of gold occurrences on the property? And certainly the property size is important, because if you have got a small property, even if there was a large deposit on it, it probably would go beyond the deposit, beyond the property size. Ownership's important. Is the property 100% owned? Is it encumbered? What infrastructure is there? Is the infrastructure going to cause problems for exploration and mining? And finally, and most important too, is what is who is the management? And I can tell you that as you go through this presentation, all the boxes have been ticked off. I think that David has done an excellent job in putting this project together, and I'm really honored to be a part of it. So Dave, if you would take it away.
You need some help here, Dave? I can move this forward for us. Let's get into the project, okay? Dave, are you there? We cannot hear you.
I forgot to unmute myself.
Thank you.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah, no, as we go through this, I'm hoping that we'll find that that all of those boxes are ticking themselves as we progress through the presentation. The stuff that Phil was mentioning, I think, you know, we worked very hard to try to find a project that would tick all those boxes. So we'll go right into the project, look at where we are. Here are many of the active gold projects on the island of Newfoundland. We are located here on the eastern part of the island of Newfoundland at the top of the Burin Peninsula. The red star here shows our project. And this is really a part of Newfoundland that has seen far less historical gold exploration. Central Newfoundland has seen a fair bit of gold exploration since the 1980s. We're looking in central Newfoundland at mostly orogenic systems, and these were the focus of a lot of interest historically and more recently, of course. However, on the eastern part of Newfoundland, we're looking at epithermal deposits, and these have just been neglected from an exploration perspective in Newfoundland. And I think that's what I saw in 2018 when we went in and staked this project in conjunction with plethora of private equity. It was really that epithermal potential. It's something that it's a type of ore deposit I enjoy looking for, and it struck me how little this was explored in eastern Newfoundland. So I think one of the great opportunities here is the fact that it has seen so little exploration. It means it's really quite a bit less drilled than anywhere else on the island.
Dave, why was it so? Why is there a lack of exploration there? Because early on, your guys' some initial holes have already shown some nice mineralization. So why? Give us a little background. Why it was ignored?
I think you have to kind of look historically and look at who was exploring back at the time. And you know, it was some large mining companies like Noranda, for example, and they had a very specific target in mind. And you have to remember what the gold price was doing back in those days. Open pit bulk tonnage targets were not necessarily at the forefront of everyone's mind. And so, you know, they tended to be looking for smaller, narrow vein, high grade deposits. And that's the kind of thing that people might find in central Newfoundland. Whereas the large scale open pit bulk tonnage targets, which today are very exciting, very valid targets today, were not so much at the time. So I think that's likely why it was just not taken as seriously at the time.
Now there is more activity happening in the area though, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, especially since we've been involved, we've been staked now, I think on all directions. Large part of the Burin has been looked at. We have some, partner companies, I guess, or peer companies rather, elsewhere on the Burin, poking away at some interesting showings as well. So yeah, we're seeing an uptick in exploration, certainly. The entire geology of the Burin Peninsula is the right type of geology for this type of ore deposit. You're really looking here, the green rocks are subaerial volcanic rocks, the red rocks are granites, and these yellow lines are really these long crustal structures that host most of the known historical and present day showings. So it's the kind of geology you might find in a place like northern Mexico or parts of Chile, or places where you have these subaerial volcanics, which are providing the right plumbing systems and the right heat sources and water flows to create these high sulfidation and low sulfidation epithermal deposits. So these are all necessary ingredients. This is a great geological terrain for this type of ore deposit. The next thing you want to look at on any project is infrastructure. There's no sense finding a deposit if you'll never get to mine it because it's too far from infrastructure or it's politically not workable or whatever might happen. In this case, this is a fantastic part of Newfoundland. The property here is shown in dark blue. So I'm looking at it up. Oh, let me just get my note. I'm in trouble with the whiteboard.
No problem. What can I help you out with here?
That's all right. The claims are shown in blue. You can see it's a large property package, 33 kilometers long, 9 kilometers wide. The black line shows the Burin Highway. This is a 2-lane paved highway, runs right alongside the claims. The pink line shows a 138 kilovolt power line. It's the big regional power line that feeds all the communities along the Burin Peninsula. So we've got high voltage power right alongside. One of Canada's busier shipping ports is located just on the east side of Placentia Bay. In Come By Chance, that's a big oil refinery port. So you have deep water shipping right there. And you have two sources of labor, Clarenville in the north, Marystown in the south. Both are sort of mid-sized commercial industrial towns. There's actually a mining community in Marystown from the Canada Fluorspar mine in the southern tip of the Burin. So you have experienced labor, you have all of the infrastructure you need, shipping, access, power, large property, which is 100% owned. We have a small NSR and a few claims in the central part of the property, but really the rest of the property is 100% owned. All of these are great things to have from a development point of view. You can see right away that CapEx on this type of project would be relatively modest in size because all of that infrastructure is located right there already.
Dave, real quick question that just came in. Somebody was asking, do you guys think you're going to add to this land package, or is it large enough?
Well, in the immediate vicinity of where we are, I'm quite happy with our land package. I think we got all the best ground. We've been staked around now on all sides. In fact, this claim map is a little out of date. We've been staked around on the southeast side, on the northwest side. So there's not a whole lot of ground available around us. There are some other parts of the Burin Peninsula that I have my eye on that would be great to pick up and would, I think, be very complementary to this property package. But in the short term, I think we have a lot of ground to cover already. This is a large property. It has a lot of great showings, and I'm convinced we staked and put together the best property package on the northern Burin Peninsula. So no immediate plans to expand in the immediate vicinity, but in the longer term, in terms of developing a project pipeline, there are certainly some interesting things to look for and look at on the Burin Peninsula.
Okay, thank you.
So zooming in now at the property scale itself, reminder, we're looking at about 33 kilometers in length along this overall property trend. This is a target-rich property. Each of these yellow dots, or yellow stars rather, represents a historical showing that's been documented by the Newfoundland Survey or by government geologists. These are, well, first thing that will strike any observer is they line up along linear trends. And there are two linear trends. There's this trend here along the west side called the Bullwinkle Strange corridor. That's about 6 kilometers of hydrothermal showings, Not a single one has ever been drilled. And then from down here in the very southern tip of the Burin all the way up to past Hickeys Pond, we have something like 15 or 20 kilometers of discontinuous showings. Not a lot of outcrop. We don't know what's in between these showings, but nothing along this has ever been drilled except for a few holes that we've put in now at the Red Star in the at Hickeys Pond here. So this is a large property package. There's a lot of showings. Each one of these showings has all the right ingredients for a discovery. We've chosen to start at Hickeys Pond because that's the best known of the systems and maybe has the best surface exposure. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through our recent results at Hickeys. And once we've gone through those results and discussed what they might mean, we're going to zoom back out again and talk about a few of these outboard targets that we'll be looking at this summer.
Dave, real quick, can you give us a little understanding of how you go about ranking these targets? I realize Hickeys Pond, that's where you started, but you have a lot of targets here. So how are you ranking them if there hasn't been that much work done on them?
Well, the first thing you always do on this kind of thing, establish what kind of target you're looking at. The nice thing about these targets, most of these targets don't have very much outcrop. The outcrop in this part of Newfoundland is pretty sparse. There's a lot of bog. There's a lot of very shallow till. And so when you're lucky, you get a little bit of rock sort of poking out of the bog. So you're only seeing a small part of what can be a much larger system, and you have to put together the clues and the evidence to determine what kind of system you're looking for. At Hickeys, we understand the mineralogy, the alteration, geochemistry of the system. We know the types of minerals we're looking for to confirm that this is a genuine high sulfidation alteration system. So you're looking for those pathfinder alteration products, things like alunite, things like pyrophyllite. As you go further outboard, you're looking at sericite, halos. You're looking for quartz, always looking for hydrothermal quartz. And you put those pieces of evidence together with, say, geophysical maps. We have a great, magnetic data set and EM data set over part of this property. We're currently still trying to get the airborne finished on the southern part of the property, which will add another layer of information. And you start to layer those data sets. And when you say, well, we have a great geophysical anomaly here, and we also have alunite on surface, and maybe we've done some basal till geochemistry that's confirming we have gold in basal till. Now you have three separate lines of evidence that's pointing towards a valuable and worthwhile target to chase. In some cases, you don't have that amount of evidence yet. It doesn't mean that it's not a valid target. It means you just may not have the quantity of evidence that you want. So the ones that I'm looking at, that I'm going to be discussing today, so the targets along the Bullwinkle Strange Corridor and Tower, for example, those are targets that we now have sufficient evidence that we're very comfortable that there is a significant alteration system running through there that just needs some drilling at this point. So it's really once you get to that sort of critical mass of evidence that you start to say, wow, this really needs a drill hole. There's other targets along here, for example, maybe Chimney Falls, which is the target just to the southwest of Hickeys Pond, that has a little less evidence at present. We know there's a bit of grade at surface. We have a very small exposure. It'd be nice to do a little bit more work before we bring a drill on that one. But we have several high quality targets that I'm very confident in drilling this summer. And that's what we'll be looking at when we get back to this slide after we look at Hickeys.
Perfect, thank you.
So we're going to zoom in now to Hickeys Pond, which is the red dot here. And first thing to note before we do that, we've tested a very small amount of the overall strike at Hickeys Pond. The geophysical signature there in the VTEM airborne survey is about 7 kilometers in length. That's sort of the length of these red parallel lines. We've tested in total about 700 meters of that, which is about 10% of the overall system. So it's early days at Hickeys Pond. We mobilized the drill in late January, early February. We were drilling by the first week of February. We drilled between February and mid-March, just under 4,000 meters. That's 22 diamond drill holes that we put in fairly tightly around Hickeys Pond. This is a plan map of Hickeys Pond. The gray traces, so the light gray lines show the 2020 drilling. The dark black lines show the results that we released in our news release of last week, and the red lines are showing the drill holes that we have completed, but the samples are still at the assay lab. So you can see that what we've released so far is actually from quite a small area, only about 150 meters wide, centered on the Hickeys Pond knob. The objective of this drilling was really to start establishing continuity of mineralization, testing the system under the knob, under the pond, and we've expanded that with the holes in red here that we're waiting on results. What we're hoping to show with this is that this is a robustly mineralized system. It appears to have depth potential, it appears to have strike potential, and it has continuity on section. So we're going to be looking now at these black traces. Those are the results we released in our news release of last week. And I'm showing the results here. These are results as they've been received from the lab. So we haven't received results from the lab in numerical order. We started with hole 8 this year. Holes 1 through 7 were done in 2020. So these are the results for hole 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 20. And that means that we're still waiting on 9, and then 15 through 19, and then 21 through 29, which represents the overall program we drilled. Highlights from this program. First of all, if you run your fingers down the assay table, every hole that we receive results for has intersected interesting lengths and grades of gold. Highlights might include things like 16 meters of 1.57, including 8.25 meters of 2.58. We have 10.5 meters of 1.37, 34 meters of 0.84. These are all grades that are likely to be economic in an open pit near surface scenario. These are all very shallow drill holes. You can see that the depths of the intercepts are all very, very shallow. So we haven't tested very much of the system. We've tested the shallow depths over a relatively modest amount of strike, but we're establishing that we have a very interesting looking continuous body of mineralization, which is open in all directions.
So guys,
I'm going to show
why
you
drill so shallow initially, and what is the deepest hole that you have drilled? Was it mineralized the whole way through?
No, well, the geometry of the knob, like this is a dipping system. So it's dipping to the northwest, and drilling from the knob, we are drilling sort of oblique to that shear zone, just trying to get through it and see how thick it is and what might be underneath. So we have a few deeper drill holes, which were sort of exploration drill holes designed to see what was underneath the shear zone. So up to 280 meters, I think, was our deepest hole. But really, because the collars of the holes are so close to the surface showing, we're only testing the mineralized portion of the system at very shallow depth. To drill it deeper, we're going to have to step out to the other side of the pond, the northwest side of the pond, and sort of go up the hill a little bit and put in a deeper hole to test it deeper. The mineralization has been tested to about 75 meters depth at this point in time, which is not very deep, but that's what we need to establish to start to show the potential for that open pit scenario. Ultimately, we'll want to drill it down to maybe 200, 250 meters depth, the reasonable depth of an open pit. But at present, these are just the very first preliminary drill holes. We just targeted the shallow near surface stuff.
Okay.
And you'll see that very nicely actually on the sections. This is section A prime, which is the blue line here in the plan map. So we're just looking at a few holes, the holes that we put in 2020, hole 2, hole 5, and hole 8, which was really trying to test the volume between hole 2 and hole 5 and show that you had that continuity of mineralization between the two. And then again, one section over, so the next 50 meters over, section BB primed, you're looking at again, continuous mineralization, continuous over holes 10 and 11. Hole 9 has a geological interval of core that looks very similar to 10 and 11, but we're still waiting on assays for that. So we're showing so far, we have a nice shear zone. We have a nice tabular looking body of relatively low grade mineralization, but that certainly has the potential for higher grade mineralization within it. We'll be looking now to follow that to depth and to follow it along strike as we move forward with exploration at Hickeys Pond.
Dave, let me jump in quickly here. And Phil, I want to get you in quickly. You're sitting there very patiently. Just in a big picture sense, we are seeing grades of over a gram per ton. So when you talk open pit, most people think that is sufficient. Can you give us more or less an overview of what kind of grade you think you need for a high sulfidation deposit?
Well, I think that's a very good question. I think when we're looking, as we've been drilling off this deposit, we can see it at what we call the knob. There are some very high grades, and it's I think you need right now, you need at least, a gram and a half is a reasonably good number for an open pit deposit, a gold deposit. And if looking at the cross sections, we have the geometry going for us because the dip is it's about 45 degrees, which is ideal for an open pit. So we have a high grade area surrounded by lower grade. And the lower grade, that's all good news, because when you look at the mineralization here, it's, you're looking at 20, 30 meters of total mineralization. That's pretty good. So I'm naturally, we'd always like to have more grade, and that's what we're looking for next.
So far it's a good start. Are you targeting high grade shoots maybe in this system?
I think, there's every possibility of high grade shoots here. I think what we're seeing at surface where we have the higher grade is probably a shoot, and it'd be, one of our objectives will be to follow that or other shoots to depth. We're going to need more drilling at Hickeys to find those. And I think that we have all of our other prospects that also have every potential for high grade. So, starting to find, you don't know when you start to drill whether you're drilling the edge of something, whether the grade will start to increase as you go one direction or another, or down, or the geometry of these kinds of systems can be difficult to piece out at the beginning, and this is one of our challenges, certainly. But I think shoots of high grade are a very likely possibility here.
Okay, because I do remember some, I believe, higher grade surface channel sample. Right?
That's right. So, yeah, there's a very nice looking vuggy quartz unit at surface that runs. Yeah, that was at 20 meters and 9 grams, and so finding that in drill core is essentially the number one objective of the drill program. So that's what we would like to see. So, I think what we're doing with these systematic holes is we're both testing that open pit large volume potential, and each one of them is an opportunity to find high grade. Whether we find that in some of the holes that are outstanding, the red lines here that we'll be releasing results for when we receive them, or whether it'll be the next phase of drilling, it's going to take a bit of drilling to find. But I'm confident that there's some high grade somewhere to find on this property. Absolutely, it's a large property and well mineralized in a number of different showings.
Okay, thank you for taking those. We can move on.
Yeah, and I think it segues quite nicely, Cory, into our next slide, which is really, how do you think about early stage results like this? It can be sometimes confusing to look at a bunch of drill results and wonder, what does it all mean? What does it mean in terms of the potential for discovery? And I think there's two different ways of thinking about this. I put them here sort of as just a thinking point for people to look at. The result on the left is a graph that shows the endowment of many Canadian gold deposits plotted. So that's the endowment on the x-axis down here in millions of ounces, and it's plotted against the grade thickness intercept of the discovery hole of whatever deposit you were looking at. So the grade thickness intercept is essentially the thickness of a mineralized intercept multiplied by the average composited grade over that thickness, and it gives you a number. And this is a study that Newfoundland Minerals did a few years ago, and I thought it was a great study because what it did is it showed you it shows you the minimum kinds of drill results that you want to see early on from a statistical perspective. And what I've plotted here in the dotted line is where Burin Gold's discovery drill hole plotted on this graph. And it just shows you that you're in good company with several large multi-million ounce deposits. It helps to frame what those initial results might mean down the road once you have a lot more drilling. So, Newfoundland's point when they did this study was to try to look at, statistically, if you look backwards at the first program on any one of these big projects, what did the results look like? Can you say something about the probability of eventual success given the first results? And they said they did. They've had a threshold. They said about 50 gram meters per ton. If you get an initial drill hole above that, it's good news. It means that there's a nice probability of success. 50, this is a logarithmic chart, so 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 is about here. So it shows you that most of the deposit discoveries are above that line, and we're above that line. So I think that's a great way to look at these kinds of things. The other way to look at these kinds of projects is to say, where are you geologically in the world? And what kind of analogs do you have around you? So this is a map. People might want to kind of twist their heads to the right here. You can see the island of Newfoundland up here in the right-hand part of this image. Maybe if I can get the whiteboard working, I can show that. Yeah, Cory, the whiteboard's not working for me here, but
okay, let me see. Oh, I can draw something in there. I am not sure why it's not working for you.
Yeah, I'm not sure
okay,
it's working either. It doesn't matter. People can see the island of Newfoundland here on the right-hand side. You can see Nova Scotia, and then you can see the eastern seaboard of the United States. And the idea here is we're looking at one terrain, this yellow, sort of yellow-orange tan color that stretches from the eastern part of Newfoundland down the Burin Peninsula through parts of northern Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, and then down into the Carolinas. This is all one geological terrain, and it is well-known terrain for gold deposits. Some of the best-known deposits in this terrain would be things like Hale in South Carolina, which is now a 5 million ounce producer. I think OceanaGold's most profitable operation now. They're putting out over, I think it's 150,000 ounces a year. That is a great gold deposit analog in the same terrain as us. Very similar age, similar styles of tectonic emplacements, similar alteration. It's a great analog. Closer to home, we have Hope Brook in southwest Newfoundland, which is another high sulfidation epithermal deposit, which is a great comparison to give investors an idea of what we might be looking at Hickeys Pond or elsewhere on the property. And I have a few slides that specifically look at Hope Brook and try to compare it to where we are at Hickeys Pond in terms of the exploration history. This is a map of Newfoundland. The dark gray here shows the Avalonian terrain, so the same geological terrain. And you can see Hope Brook in the lower left and Hickeys Pond in the lower right. Both of these are very similar age, Neoproterozoic. They both have the same type of alteration signatures. They were both explored in the 1980s by BP Selco. BP Selco held both properties at the same time, and they had a hit at Hope Brook, which led to the Hope Brook mine. So their attention was drawn there. But there's a very interesting and I think very optimistic exploration parallel between the two. These are the two systems. On the left, Hope Brook. On the right, Hickeys Pond. They're drawn at the same horizontal scale. So you're looking at 100 meters on the left is 100 meters on the right. You can compare the two directly. This is from an old map from 1983, and it's just showing the channel samples that BP Selco had put in at surface. And you can see they had put in channel samples over about 3 kilometers, but they really only had some interesting results over about 700 meters at surface. That included a result of 15 meters of 10 grams at surface. Over at Hickeys Pond, we have a very similar situation. We have about 650 meters of surface alteration that we see. We had a channel sample, 8 meters of 11 grams, 20 meters of 9 grams. These are very comparable to what Hope Brook looked like prior to their exploration. When you then fast forward a year, you have the initial discovery drill hole at Hope Brook. That's on the left. And you have our initial discovery drill hole at Hickeys Pond. They're again very comparable. They put in a drill hole, this drill hole here, CW5, right under their surface chip sample. That's the 10 meters of 15 grams. And they got 16 meters of 7 grams. We put in a shallow drill hole, again, drawn at the same horizontal scale, under our surface channel. And we got a very similar, very analogous 10.8 meters of 4 grams. So it helps to frame the discussion because you say, what do these early scale results mean? Well, here's what it meant at Hope Brook. 2 years later, they had 150 drill holes. They had an internal resource estimate of 11.4 million tons at 4.7 grams gold, internal resource estimate of 1.7 million ounces, and they put it into production the year after that. At Hickeys Pond, we have a small amount of drilling. We now have a few more holes right here on the knob, but it isn't much more than this. And this is what 150 holes can get you. So I like this comparison because it shows you that we have very comparable early results. and that these very comparable early results with a little bit of work and a little bit of luck can end up with, a well over 1 million ounces within a year or two. That's within the realm of the possible. And this is what Hope Brook looks like today. There's the old open pit. It's been mined out. Big Ridge Gold still has an active exploration project on this project. They still actually have just about 1 million ounces of 4 grams of underground material to chase. So it's actually still an interesting project in its own right. And here's what Hickeys Pond looks like at the same scale. Lots of room for an open pit of similar sizes. Very easy to imagine that you could have a similar type of resource. And I think this is really a useful comparison to make because it lets you frame those early exploration results in context. Let's zoom back out again. We've been talking about Hickeys Pond. Hickeys Pond is that red star. The amount of drilling we put in to date is tested about 10% of that 7-kilometer trend. We have outboard targets, these yellow stars, which are further beyond that geophysical trend, each of which has some very interesting features, needs some basic drilling. When we go down to the southern half of the of the property, we have a 6-kilometer trend of showings that has never seen any drilling at all. And we have about a 2-kilometer trend at Tower, which is a great geochemical trend, which has also never seen any drilling. And then we have all of the ground in between, which has seen very, very scant exploration at all. But it's inescapable that anybody can notice the parallel nature of these trends and the fact that they line up on corridors, and it makes you wonder what's in between these corridors. So I'd like to just showcase 2 of these targets, the Bullwinkle Strange target, which is located on the west side, and then the Tower target on the east side, just to show you the kinds of things we're going to be hitting this summer.
Okay, so yeah, hopefully you can get into some of the chip samples too, because we have a couple questions on those asking what's so encouraging about them.
Sure. Whereabouts?
The Bullwinkle, we're seeing golden till, golden rock chips. Have you gotten any sample results from the sampling that's been done at these targets?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we'll see that here. Bullwinkle is a large, it's a kilometer-long zone of quartz alunite, which is a high sulfidation alteration product. It has prominent quartz ledges, hydrothermal quartz ledges, which I'm showing one here, sort of outlined in red. It's about 10, 15 meters in width. These are sort of lithocap-looking bodies. You can see there's very little outcrop at all as opposed to the little ledge. There's an old historical golden soil zone that's just adjacent to this linear ledge. It's never been followed up. We have rock chips up to a few hundred ppb down in the flat here, but there's no outcrop really to speak of. So this is a large, very impressive alteration zone that has never seen a drill hole. If you go down further south, another 1.5 kilometers, down at Strange. Strange is a showing that was so named in the 1980s because it's a little tiny block of outcrop poking out of a bog. This is a picture of it here. It's a quartz. It's a sort of a quartz alunite specularite breccia, and it was assaying in that work at 1.6 grams of gold. Very small exposure, about 1.5 kilometers from this large alteration zone. And the surprising thing about this stuff is it's never been drilled. There's no exposure between these 2 prospects. You just have a very shallow bog that covers it. So this is a really blue sky, undrilled target. It has golden soil. It has golden till. It has rock chips on surface that are returning grade. It has the right kind of alteration mineralogy, and it's never seen a drill hole. So it's a great blue sky target.
When is it going to see a drill hole? Any ideas?
It's going to see a drill hole this summer.
Perfect.
We're going to. This is one of our favorite targets to drill this summer. The other target that's be great to drill this summer is Tower. Tower is an extremely easy target to test. It's right off of a dirt road, like a government dirt road. So it's a very easy target to get to. It's seen some work in the past. It's been stripped. You can see this is an area of the exposure that's been stripped off. You can see that beautiful quartz pyrite, that pyrite sort of staining on the outcrop. This is in the sort of distal looking rocks. These are full of pyrite, but they're not the mineralized rock. The mineralized rock is just a little bit further over on the edge of a bog. So what you have here is you have boudins of lithocap hydrothermal quartz. You have the more distal quartz sericite schists, and you got these gray, crackly quartz rocks which are just exposed on the edge of a bog. Our sampling returned up to 1 gram here in those rock chips on the edge of the bog. These have never been drilled either. There's a very strong geophysical VTEM anomaly that runs parallel and probably related to the pyrite here that shows that this system has width well over 1 kilometer in length. So it's attracted a lot of attention in the past. It's just never seen a follow-up with a drill hole. This is again screaming for some drill holes this summer. An easy system to test with some shallow holes spread over that sort of kilometer length of strike, and we'll be hitting that this summer. So these kinds, Tower and Bullwinkle strains show how you've had some past workers come in, do some small programs, demonstrate these things had potential. There's just never been an operator who's held this property, who's come in well-financed with a systematic plan to attack them all. They all need to be tested. That's very clear. You asked Cory earlier about ranking. I've showcased Tower and Bullwinkle because we have the most data sets for them. They're the most advanced in that sense. But there are several other showings on these same trends that are just maybe a little bit behind Tower and Bullwinkle in terms with the state of knowledge. They're great pipeline targets. We'll be working up in parallel to these targets. But the whole Bullwinkle Strange corridor and Tower are drill-ready targets, which we'll see drilling this summer.
Sounds like you guys have a lot of drilling to do, hey? Are you going to bring in multiple drill rigs to satisfy some of this exploration?
Well, right now what we're thinking is with the current labor market in Newfoundland and the kinds of targets we want to hit here, I think we're going to go for the one drill this summer. We're going to come in, we're going to systematically go from one target to the next. We think, something like 4,000 meters of drilling on these outboard targets will be required to kind of test them all at a first level. And remember, we also have Hickeys Pond, a long strike down dip, also needs scout level drilling as well. So we'll have to come up with a plan that tries to spread out that drilling budget across all of these showings. But the objective really at this point is, we've already shown that Hickeys Pond itself is a robustly mineralized system. We want to show now district scale potential. I think each one of these targets has that potential to be, a Hope Brook or a Hale or a Hickeys Pond. And by testing them systematically, if we have any kind of luck and show a nice intercept in core on Tower or on Bullwinkle or on Strange or on all of the other showings that we'll test, then we turn this into a district scale play, and that's going to be very interesting to the markets, I think. So, if I can recap, I guess, and maybe then turn it back to you, Cory, for any questions. This is a property we've de-risked significantly since 2018. We took it as a private company. We did a lot of basic work. We've documented a lot of these showings. We're very comfortable with these showings all having great potential. We have some great analogs on the Avalonian terrain. We have the backing of New Gold, who came in as a private level investment based on our exploration thesis. I mean, this is also the kind of deposit they want to see develop. If they could find another Hale in Newfoundland, they would be overjoyed, obviously. So this is the kind of play that they were happy to back. They were early backers of the company. We've done 2 short drill holes now. We've had positive results in both drill programs. We've got mineralization in 14 of the 15 holes that we completed so far at Hickeys Pond. We have another 12 holes at the assay lab, which will be coming back in the next couple of weeks. This is a large property. We've only ever tested Hickeys Pond, and even at that, only about 700 meters of strike in total has seen a drill hole. We have at least 10 more epithermal showings that all have discovery potential. We're trying to drill test as many of them as we can this year. And I think that 4,000 meter summer drill program has all the potential to show the real district scale potential of this property. So that's kind of the overview highlight, where we are, where we're heading. I think we're going to be quite aggressive with our drilling this summer, really start to test some of these other showings. I'm always happy to talk to investors, so please don't hesitate to get in touch. And if there's any questions in the chat right now, Cory, feel free to
there are a couple,
and we'll see if we can answer them.
The first one, this shouldn't take too long, but in terms of cash position, where does the company stand?
As of this morning, 3.75 million.
Okay. And the budget, that satisfies this whole drill program then?
Yeah. We just went through a budget exercise this morning with the board at the board level, and we have enough to complete a very aggressive drill program this summer and leave a healthy contingency in the treasury at year end.
Okay, thank you. In terms of New Gold, they came in early to this company. Are they helping with any of the exploration? Do they have any technical people on your guys' team, or are they simply just along for the ride here?
They're they're along for the ride in one sense, but they take an active interest. I have a meeting, for example, with their VPX. I think it's tomorrow morning, to give him a full update on these results and discuss. They've always been quite happy to chat and give advice. But really, they have said they're happy with the operation as we're developing it, and they're happy to just chime in when necessary. But really, they just want to see the potential demonstrated on this property.
Okay. And in terms of drilling some of those other targets, like you mentioned early on, Tower, Bullwinkle, the two higher priority targets, let's call them, is it also going to be shallow drilling?
I think so to start. What we need, we know the kind of footprint we're looking for. The nice thing about high sulfidation epithermal targets, the nice thing about these big bulk tonnage targets is you don't need 1 million drill holes in a 50-meter area to prove them up. If the target's there and if it's at shallow depth, you can drill fairly widespread holes to prove that it's there. You can always go back and start to infill once you've demonstrated the presence of a significant discovery. But at the first level, at that sort of scout exploration drilling level, you can put in, like if you take Tower as an example, we have about 1 kilometer of strike of exposed rock. There's a sort of a glacial esker, which kind of blocks things on one side, and there's a pond on the other. But like for the starting point, you could put, for example, 3 drilling centers at maybe 250 meters or 200 meters centers, and you'd have 3 drill holes, maybe 6 drill holes at shallow depth. And that would test that volume over about 600 meters of strike. If Tower hosts a significant resource at shallow depth, we'll intersect it with those kinds of drilling. So you don't need a great deal of drilling to test these targets quickly, which is one of the great features of this kind of deposit.
Yep, and it's early on. Is mineralization looking to be the same at Tower, Bullwinkle as Hickeys Pond?
Yeah, in the historical literature, the geologists that have documented all of these systems in the past have noted how similar, for example, Bullwinkle looks to Hickeys. It has the same alteration sequences. It has some of the same features on surface. All it didn't have on surface is an exposure of significantly mineralized rock. But that doesn't mean it's not there. It just means we're not seeing it at surface. So yes, they are all classic high sulfidation looking showings. And by that, I mean showings that have things like alunite, things like pyrophyllite. These are standard alteration minerals in high sulfidation environments, and they're related to that high temperature acidic fluid that kind of percolates through the rocks. A lot of hydrothermal quartz, which is that residual quartz that's left behind when the acids dissolve the rocks. We're seeing that at Hickeys. We see the lithocaps at Tower and at Bullwinkle. So they all have very similar features in that respect.
Okay. A couple questions on Hickeys Pond. Since it is a pond, how deep is the pond? Would it be an issue for the open pit? Any environmental issues here?
No, so that's a great question. The when we did the IP geophysical survey back in 2019, we had to do sink electrodes to the bottom of the pond. So we actually have very detailed bathymetry for that pond. It's actually average depth, I think, is 1.8 meters. Very shallow depth. There's one little section that's a few meters more than that, but really it's more like a widening of the creek more than an actual lake. So it would be an engineering issue at the open pit level, certainly, but it's not insurmountable by any means. It's not a very deep pond at all. Sorry, what was the follow up to that?
More just environmental issues. You've addressed
environmental issues. Yeah. The one thing we need to be careful of in Newfoundland and in general are salmon rivers, right? If you have salmon in a river, it's generally much higher level of oversight, permitting, etc. But by an accident of geography, I guess, the river that Hickeys Pond drains into is right at the ocean. There's a series of very high waterfalls that block it completely from any kind of salmon. So there are no historical salmon, and it's not a registered salmon river on the Newfoundland government databases. So that just means, you know, the level of permitting is easier in that respect, because there are no active salmon populations in those creeks. I mean, it doesn't mean that you don't have to be careful, of course, but it does mean that it's just one less hurdle.
Okay. Thank you. Another question, just, it sounds like there's going to be a lot of drill results still to come. You guys are still fairly early on in this program. What's the lab turnaround time like in terms of news flow? When should we expect news?
Well, lab turnaround time depends always on the lab you're using and how much you're willing to pay to get your assays to the front of the queue. At the present time, we're using Eastern Analytical, which is a lab based in Springdale, which has usually much like quicker results than most of the bigger labs. They are as busy as anyone else, however, so even their turnarounds have increased. At present time, if you rush your assays to Eastern, you're looking at between 4 and 6 weeks. And if you don't rush them, you're looking at nominally twice that, if not a bit more. So we rushed the first, several batches of samples just because we wanted to be able to communicate results to market quickly. So the first 7 holes that we released results were marked as rush. We rushed them all, got them sent to the lab. But the others are just as interesting. They just weren't rushed because we just, we wanted to. You can't pay you can't pay double price for assays for too long. So so those ones are looking like 2 months, 8 to 10 weeks. So I expect that we'll be getting assays back in the next week, and they'll be dribbling in. So we'll package them up into consistent, coherent news releases, 3 or 4 holes at a time, and put those out as soon as we have them. So I would be expecting mid-May. It would be a great time to be expecting another result, another release from us. Just depends on when those assays come back. But the last time I checked with the lab manager, we were looking at 4 to 6 weeks for rush and 8 to 10 for non-Russian. I think it's probably even a little longer than that. The labs are always as optimistic as it gets, right?
Yeah, it's too bad that they're still so far behind, but it's a really sector-wide
Well, it's a good
problem.
sign. It means everybody's working and lots of people are drilling. So it's it's great to see the assay labs full. It's just frustrating when you're waiting for results.
Yeah, that's fair. This picture that's on this final slide here, I think some people are having trouble reading the text in there. Where was this sample taken on the project?
This is just a chunk of visible gold. This is the dirty fingers of one of our directors who picked it up off the ground at Hickeys Pond. So this is from the knob showing. It's a piece of vuggy epithermal quartz. It has a beautiful little piece of visible gold. I would say that visible gold is not a common feature at Hickeys Pond, but this kind of photo shows it's certainly possible. You can get nice coarse visible gold. More generally, the gold is finer grain than this, and we don't see it. I think in core, I've seen 1 or 2 flecks of visible gold, but it's a very different type of ore deposit from, say, the orogenic deposits of central Newfoundland, which feature a lot of visible gold. Here, our gold is more evenly distributed and finer in the rocks. So this is a fun geological picture, but it's not necessarily representative of the mineralization at Hickeys.
Okay, Phil, one final question for you. This is more of a market-based question, but there's been a couple people that have noted that, look, there's a lot of exploration companies in Newfoundland, the juniors, that are trading lower. That's a sector-wide issue, again, for the juniors. There just hasn't been a whole flood of money coming into the juniors. But anything that you can point to in Newfoundland that could help provide a catalyst for companies much like yours that are exploring in the province?
Well, it's always a discovery that helps, and perhaps we'll have some of the other targets come out with higher grades. We don't know, but right now it's the market is the market, and it's really I've been watching fairly carefully, and people come out with good results right now, and it's a liquidity event. It's right now it's the psychology of the market, but there's good work being performed not just in Newfoundland but elsewhere, and so there's some pretty darn good results coming out with some companies, and the nothing happens. Like the response is nil. It's just we're going through a phase right now of market that I've been through before, And it's a matter now, if you are forward looking, there's some great buys out there right now.
Yeah, what's important too is having the cash in the bank to keep doing the work needed to move the company forward and de-risking it. There is contact information there for Dave. If any of you have questions, if you want to email me directly, happy to pass those questions on and get them answered. My email address is fleck@kereport.com. Dave, Phil, thank you very much for sharing the company's story with us. And everybody, thank you for tuning in. Please keep in touch. Send us all your questions. Thanks again, guys.
Goodbye.
Thank you very much.